On today's show, Jimmy Butler injury update, and we address the Amen Thompson controversy, plus the biggest difference from game 1 to game 2 in the Houston Rockets offense, and can Houston's defense keep the Warriors in check? It's all coming up right here at Locked On Rockets.
This is Mission Control, Houston.
Ignition sequence start. 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
What's up and welcome to another edition of Locked On Rockets, your daily podcast home for everything Houston Rockets basketball. As always, I'm your host, Jackson Gatlin, native Houstonian and credentialed media member. I'm also the host of Locked On NBA Thursdays. Be sure to follow along wherever you listen to your podcasts or on YouTube. Just search Locked On Rockets, where the best way you can help us grow our show is to listen every single day on a podcast platform of your choosing. Like, comment, subscribe on YouTube. Also, check out our Locked On Rockets newsletter. Would sincerely appreciate all of that support. Now, today's episode is brought to you by Monarch Money. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONNBA at monarchmoney.com for 50% off of your first year. And as always, thanks so much for making Locked On Rockets part of your day every single day, whether it's on your way to work, on your lunch break, in the gym. Thank you so much for being an everydayer. On today's show, we're going to talk a little bit about Jimmy Butler, a quick update on his injury status ahead of game 3, as well as the Rockets, Ime Udoka and Dillon Brooks, addressing kind of the narrative, the controversy surrounding Amen Thompson right now, with Warriors fans labeling him a dirty player, which is hilarious because, you know, Draymond Green. We'll talk about that. We're going to get into the biggest change offensively for the Houston Rockets from game 1 to game 2. And can the Rockets defense keep the Warriors in check the rest of this series? Got a lot to get into today. So let's start with the quick update on Jimmy Butler. Per Shams Charania, Golden State's Jimmy Butler has been diagnosed with a deep glute muscle contusion, and his status for game 3 against the Houston Rockets is in serious jeopardy, league sources tell ESPN. This is best case because MRI showed Butler avoided any fracture or structural damage. So first things first, glad that Jimmy avoided any serious injury, right? Injuries are the worst. You never wish them upon anybody, even your worst enemy, even the Golden State Warriors. You don't want anybody getting hurt in these games. So just get that out the way. Now, I will say, first thing to consider here is Shams is reporting this as, Jimmy, his availability in quote unquote serious jeopardy. Meanwhile, you have other, reporters like Chris Haynes or Slater with The Athletic that are maybe a little bit more their reporting is a little bit more optimistic about Jimmy's possibility of participating in game 3 and being back for the next game in the series. And keep in mind, right, Shams and Jimmy's agent earlier this season, Bernie Lee, like they got into it, right? A very public spat dispute. And so you have to follow where the sources of this information are likely coming from. And so with Shams and with kind of the fallout that he dealt with Jimmy's camp earlier this season, he's probably getting information directly from the Warriors organization. They're probably keeping things a little bit more close to the vest, trying to temper expectations a little bit, that kind of thing. Whereas maybe other guys who are maybe a little bit more close to Jimmy or have a little bit better access to those directly around Jimmy are maybe a little bit more optimistic about his ability to play here in game 3. I'd wager that Jimmy's probably going to play. Look, he's one of the toughest dudes in the NBA. And if nothing's broken, if he's just dealing with, a muscle contusion, he's going to get whatever, cortisone shots or whatever he needs, and he'll try and tough it out and play through it. The real question is when Jimmy plays, I'm not even gonna say if, when Jimmy plays in game 3, does he play hurt, right? Is he playing it, 70%, 80%, 90%? Does he look just fine? Does he still look like Jimmy Butler? Can he still be playoff Jimmy, even if he's not 100%? That's kind of the big question mark there. And we'll talk a little bit more about Jimmy versus no Jimmy when we take a look at the Rockets defense a little bit later on in segment 3. But what I do want to address here is there's this awful narrative on social media that Amen Thompson somehow intentionally injured Jimmy Butler. And I just want to take a couple minutes here on the show to dispel that notion. And first and foremost, let's go to both Ime Udoka and Dillon Brooks, who were asked by myself and Chancellor Johnson at Rockets practice on Friday afternoon about the kind of controversy, the narrative forming around Amen Thompson and this quote unquote dirty play on Jimmy Butler. So let's hear what they had to say.
No, I think the dirty player is Draymond giving a little push as regular basketball players do, and Jimmy's flying in the air for a rebound, and stuff happens. Amen's not a dirty player. He has no anything to do with being a dirty player. We're not really about that. We're on that next game, and Jimmy can get better.
Yeah, I mean, it's obvious it wasn't intentional. You look at all the bodies in between and him getting bumped and tripped, and the way he fell, you don't fall in somebody's face first on purpose. We saw some things happen last night in the Memphis game, and things are unintentional. Guys are playing hard and get tripped up, something like that, so we don't even talk about it or put stock in it. Like I see, it's pretty clear. It's not an intentional thing, and it's obviously not a dirty player. There's a difference between aggressive physical play and being dirty, and you can question some of their things as well on there.
First, I absolutely love that. Now, Dillon was more direct about it. He was like, well, Draymond pushed him. And I don't know so much about Draymond pushing Amen. It kind of looked like he just got maybe unintentionally tripped by Draymond. And, Amen was kind of stuck between Draymond and Steven Adams. It was accidental 100%. There was no malicious intent behind it whatsoever. And then even Ime, kind of in coach speak there a little bit at the end, saying you can even look at some of the stuff that they're doing on their end, right? Basically saying, yeah, the Warriors play dirty. They're doing dirty stuff. So take a look at what they're doing. But I like that they were able to kind of address it. And even, Steve Kerr and the Warriors coaching staff said that they didn't see anything wrong with that play, right? It's just an unfortunate kind of series of events that happen on the basketball court when guys are playing hard and you're fighting through screen. It's just one of those things that happens, right? And it's unfortunate, but seeing Warriors fans completely crashing out about this and Amen Thompson being public enemy number one in their eyes is the funniest thing. And the cognitive dissonance is just hilarious because, talk about the pot calling the kettle black. When you have Draymond Green on your team, Draymond Green there is a current viral clip out there. I've shared it. Other people have shared it on social media of all the different BS instances of Draymond very clearly and intentionally making dirty plays, hurting other players, the stomp on Sabonis, gouging out Harden's eyes, whacking Nurkic in the head, putting Rudy Gobert in a chokehold, all the stuff that Draymond Green has done throughout the course of his career. And Warriors fans have the audacity to try and label Amen Thompson a dirty player for tripping and falling. Ime Udoka said it best, right? You don't intentionally fall face first like that. And he put his arms out in front of him to catch himself on the ground. So just the whole situation is frankly kind of stupid. And for Warriors fans trying to cope through this situation, I get it. It sucks. Your star player getting hurt absolutely sucks. I sympathize there a little bit, but to turn it around and try and be like, no, Amen Thompson's dirty. He's a thug, this, that, and the other thing. Just get a grip and grow up. And the other part of it too is, injuries happen, right? Warriors fans have been telling other teams for literally years, for the last decade. Warriors fans have been telling other teams, injuries are a part of the game. You just play through it. You play who's in front of you, right? So you know what? It's not as fun when you have to take a taste of your own medicine. So hopefully Warriors fans can grow up a little bit. I do hope that Jimmy's okay. We'll see what happens the rest of the series, and we'll talk about kind of some of the defensive expectations for this Rockets team in segment 3. If Jimmy's healthy, if he's not healthy, that kind of thing. Talk about some of the dynamics there. But coming up, want to get into the biggest offensive difference for this Rockets team from game 1 to game 2. Spoiler alert, it wasn't just about hitting shots. We're going to get there in just one moment. First, today's episode is brought to you by Monarch Money. Look, have you ever checked your bank account and wondered, where did all my money go? It's happened to me before. I'm sure it's happened to you. Between dining out, online shopping, and entertainment costs, it's really easy to lose track. That's where Monarch Money comes in, your personal CFO, giving you full visibility and control over your finances. Monarch Money isn't just a budgeting app. It's a complete financial command center. You can track all your accounts, investments, and spending in one place, so you can stop just managing your money and start building your wealth. Look, Instead of juggling multiple apps, you can use Monarch to check your finances, track spending, and even plan long-term goals. Managing money with your partner is smoother than ever. You can track shared and personal accounts, set goals, and stay on the same page without the stress. So take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONNBA at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONNBA for half off your very first year. And continuing on here at Locked On Rockets, your daily podcast, home for everything Houston Rockets basketball. All right, so Rockets obviously improved quite a bit offensively from game 1 to game 2. Game 1 putting up just a paltry 85 points and then jumping all the way up to 109 in game 2. What was the biggest difference offensively for the Houston Rockets? Now, yes, some of it was hitting shots. Now, we did talk about this in our game recap of game 2 in the series, but a big part of it was also utilizing Alperen Sengun differently than what they did in game 1, right? In game 1, they funneled the ball into Alp a lot, and he played one-on-one for a majority of the game, and he feasted in that one-on-one coverage, but the Warriors kind of took the Rockets out of some of what they wanted to do with other guys, but it was also about what the Rockets tried to do and how they approached the game differently from game 1 to game 2. Game 1, a lot of the offensive game plan was trying to hunt mismatches and isolate and attack Steph Curry. And we ran through the numbers on a recent episode, right? They tried that about 14, 15 times, and they didn't really have a lot of success with it. So they went back to some of what really gave them a lot of success this entire regular season, and that was really utilizing their screening actions to open up different guys and to get everybody involved in the offense. In game 1 of this series, the Rockets only had 6 points off of screen assists in game 1. They had 2 points generated from Fred VanVleet's screen and then 4 points generated off of Steven Adams screens. That's nothing. That's embarrassingly low for a screen assist total number. In game 2, that number jumped up to 34 points off of screen assists, with 18 of those 34 points being generated by Alperen Sengun by himself. And that matches the eye test. They focused a lot more on screening. They focused a lot more on having Jalen Green be the primary ball handler and initiating those offensive sets and offensive actions for the Rockets in game 2. And so I asked Ime Udoka about it at Rockets practice. Let's hear what he had to say.
We definitely went back to more of what we've done all year. Not hunting matchups as much. Like I said, it got us a little stagnant there. And obviously, those isolations, if you're rolling, they look good. But like you get everybody involved, and obviously Alperen in the pocket, making the hockey assist is a good thing for us. He's really good there. So we did make an effort to go back to normal cover, normal schemes, and plays that we run, and stop hunting matchups as much.
So, to Ime's credit, I want to give him some credit here. He was fully transparent, right? He said, "Look, we switched things up, right? We went back to what worked for us in the regular season," highlighting that, yeah, in game 1, they really did try to hunt those mismatches, right, against Steph Curry in particular. And honestly, not a bad strategy. Like, I don't think it was necessarily executed properly, unfortunately, for the Rockets. And so they went back to what they know, what they're comfortable with. Right. There were a lot of possessions where Jalen got ISO'd on Steph, but it wasn't ever right. It didn't ever feel like a true isolation possession, because even though Steph kind of was able to hold his own, one-on-one, he had that backline defense, right? Draymond Green and Kevon Looney and all the other Warriors loading up defensively, and the Rockets spacing wasn't great. So even in those possessions where like it was Jalen attacking Steph or a DB trying to post him up or whatever, it wasn't ever really a true isolation possession, because you had so many other Warriors like shaded over, ready to help if Steph got beat. Whereas in game 2, they shifted things back. They stopped worrying about trying to hunt Steph, and they just got back to playing their brand of basketball, right? They played a lot through Jalen Green as the primary ball handler, much less through Fred VanVleet out there. They did a much better job of staggering the minutes between Jalen and Alp. There was only a very brief amount of time in game 2 where there wasn't either of them out there on the floor. And in those moments where there wasn't either of them, Fred VanVleet was out there to at least keep try and keep things under control, rather than Ime going to that supersized jumbo lineup of the Terror Twins and Jabari and Adams and Sengun, which, even though Sengun's out there in that lineup kind of struggles from a spacing perspective with the 3 non-shooters. We didn't see that happen in game 2. So the Rockets were able to clean up a lot of things offensively. What I will say for Ime, and I want to give him the benefit of the doubt here, in theory, I like the game plan of hunting Steph Curry. Like, in theory, it kind of works. And I think it's one of those where I think the idea is, right, the Rockets do have a lot of guys that should, on paper, be able to take advantage of a mismatch against Steph Curry on the offensive side of the ball, or with Curry playing defense, whatever, whether it's Jalen, DB, Jabari, Tari, whoever, Alp on a switch. However, they didn't execute it properly, and credit to the Warriors defense for being that kind of backline support to Steph. But I think it was not only Ime wanted to find ways to maybe generate some, quality offense, right, with those ISO possessions, but also he was looking for a way to wear Steph Curry down. Right? Like, Steph is so integral to the Warriors' offensive success that if you can find any way to gas him out and make him do the extra work defensively, if you could come up with a game plan where you were going to force Steph to defend every second that he was on the floor, instead of having possessions where he's able to kind of conserve energy and sit in the corner and not have to D up against your team's best offensive players, then, that allows him to be fresher, right? And leaves a lot of energy for him to expend on the offensive side of the floor. And that's where I think some of that game plan was probably coming from. Not that the Rockets thought, oh, this is our best chance offensively is to ISO and to hunt Steph, but kind of a combination of, we feel confident enough in our guys to hunt Steph, and it'll have the added benefit of wearing Steph down as the series progresses. But it was kind of disastrous there in game 1. You saw it, only 85 points. Really, only Sengun was the guy that could get it going, and everybody else kind of struggled. So you flip the script, you get back to game 2, and you get back to what made you successful in the regular season, which is really using Alperen, Sengun, and Jalen Green and making them their 2-man game, the bread and butter of the Houston Rockets offense, right? A lot of Jalen Green initiating with some Alp pick and rolls, with Alp as the screener, whether it's in, dribble handoff sets, or he comes up and sets the screen for Jalen. And then it's up to Jalen to read, right? To see what the defense is going to do, and whether that is Jalen, rejecting the screen and getting downhill, or taking the screen and then he gets blitzed by the Warriors perimeter guys. The big decides to trap him. Then you get the outlet pass to Alperen Sengun, and when he's there on the short roll, right, and he gets the outlet pass, him being in the middle of the floor is absolutely lethal, because it gives him the opportunity to look to attack himself. And at that point, he's not being guarded by whoever the big is that trapped Jalen, because the Warriors defense is then in rotation. So he gets to attack, or he gets to pass out. And that's what Ime talked about, right? The kind of hockey assists that Alperen Sengun is able to generate by getting the Warriors defense in rotation once he's in the middle of the floor. So the Rockets offense looked night and day different from game 1 to game 2. It'll be interesting to see if Ime tries to mix in a little bit of those possessions of kind of hunting Steph Curry, because you don't want to completely let Steph off the hook, right? You don't want to just let him be able to go to sleep every defensive possession by having the Warriors hide Steph on, a corner 3-point shooter who's not involved in the actions, and Steph's just sitting in the corner, catching his breath, whatever, and saving all that energy for the offensive side of the ball. So I would still like to see the Rockets utilize, right? We've seen it all throughout the regular season. There's plenty of possessions where Dillon Brooks likes to punish those smaller players. So if at any point Steph Curry is matched up with DB, right, and you don't have to necessarily hunt for that mismatch. If Steph's just guarding Dillon Brooks, and you can get DB a quick post up where he can get to work and try to back Steph down a little bit, any and all of those little kind of naturally occurring mismatches throughout the course of a game, I think, are still important to try and take advantage of. But it was nice to see the Rockets kind of get back to what gave them some level of offensive success in the regular season, as opposed to trying to manufacture something brand new here in the postseason. But I'll get a lot of credit to Ime Udoka, right? Game 1, first time the Rockets are in the playoffs in over 5 years, and he throws out a strategy. He's like, yeah, we'll go out there and we'll try something game 1. And it didn't work, right? It kind of blew up in his face, but he owned up to it. He said, we tried something, didn't work. We went back to what did work, and the recipe for success is right there. So hopefully we see more of that throughout this series as it progresses. But the real question mark for me is, can the Houston Rockets defense continue to keep the Warriors in check? We're going to get there in just one moment. And final segment here at Locked On Rockets, your daily podcast, home for everything Houston Rockets basketball. All right, so looking at the defensive side of things for this Houston Rockets team, we're now building a pretty decent sample here. Now, granted, game 2, only 8 minutes from Jimmy Butler, and a lot of this is going to be contingent on whether Jimmy comes back, which, like I said in segment 1, I feel like he's going to be back for game 3. That's just kind of what my gut is telling me is going to happen. So it's less a question of if Jimmy is coming back and more what he looks like once he is back, right? He's 70%, 80%, whatever. And honestly, maybe the Warriors gamble a little bit, because if you think you can afford to rest Jimmy for like game 3 or maybe even game 4, right? Let him get a couple games rest and then bring him back for games 5, 6, and 7 of the series. Do you risk bringing Jimmy back in game 3 and he's at like 70% effectiveness, or do you let him get a game or 2 of rest and then bring him back and he's back up to 80 or 90 or 100% effectiveness, right? That's kind of the internal dilemma for the Golden State Warriors at this point. Now I will say off rip, without Jimmy Butler, this Warriors team still has a lot of talent. They're still able to win a game or 2, but we saw this Warriors team without Jimmy for the first half of this season. Now, granted, they had the other pieces of that Jimmy Butler trade, right? Wiggins and then, the other guys. That version of the Warriors was bad, right? They were barely the 10th seed in the Western Conference. They were struggling. Jimmy has completely changed the fabric and identity of this Warriors team and made them one of the better teams in the NBA, right? They were just flat out dominant once Jimmy Butler became a part of the roster. And that's the version of Jimmy that's kind of coasting in the regular season too. That's not even playoff Jimmy that we're talking about. So without Jimmy, I think the Rockets are going to mop the floor with the Warriors. They just don't have enough outside of Steph offensively. And it's going to allow the Rockets to really key in defensively on Steph Curry if Jimmy Butler's not out there. They just don't have a singular guy on their roster that can even come close to replicating what he does, right? Jonathan Kuminga, a little bit. He has the athleticism. He can get downhill a little bit, but he's not anywhere near the playmaker is. He doesn't provide the level of kind of that calming influence that Jimmy Butler has on the Warriors offense. And he doesn't have anywhere near the gravity that Jimmy Butler has. So I'm going to operate under the assumption that Jimmy Butler is playing, and we'll see whether or not he's, at 100%, whatnot. Now, the real interesting thing is here, the Rockets now have 3 straight games going back into the final game of the regular season of holding the Golden State Warriors to under 100 points. So they played them at full strength in the regular season and won 106-96. And again, kept the Warriors at 96 points, under 100. Then in game 1, which they did ultimately lose because of their own offensive issues and struggles and whatnot, the experimentation with hunting Steph and just the horrendous shooting night from the backcourt between Fred and Jalen, Rockets lost 95-85. But again, defense wasn't the issue in that game. They played perfect. They played good enough defense to win that game. Talked about it in the recap show for that one, right? And then in game 2, they held the Warriors to 94 points. So if this pattern holds, they're going to hold the Warriors to 93 points in game 3 on the road. But like in all seriousness, I just don't see where the Warriors are going to suddenly, manufacture a bunch of extra points. I don't see how they're going to suddenly break out of this defensive bind that the Rockets kind of have them in, where they haven't been able to break 100 against this team in 3 straight games. And maybe you chalk it up to, some poor shooting. Maybe you chalk it up to, game 2, obviously with no Jimmy Butler out there, but even the percentages in some of these games, like for example, in game 1, Warriors scored 95 points. They shot 37.5% from downtown. It's not like they had an awful shooting night. They shot perfectly fine. Rockets just did a really good job of limiting their total number of possessions. They only got 76 shots up total in the game. It was a really slow, kind of gritty rock fight kind of affair. Meanwhile, on the other end, the Rockets took 87 shots, right? 11 more shot attempts. They were just so dog water at converting in game 1. Their offense really lost in that game. Going back to the regular season meetup between these two teams, Warriors still shot 37.2% from downtown. It's not like any of these 3 games the Warriors have had an off shooting night. Even here in game 2, without Jimmy Butler, the Warriors managed to shoot 39.5% from downtown. The 3-point shooting from this Warriors team is very legit, but it hasn't killed the Rockets yet. From a simple math perspective, the Rockets have just gotten so many more possessions over the course of the series than the Warriors have. And once they started converting offensively, I mean, I really struggle to see how Golden State puts up enough points to beat this Rockets team. It's going to all be contingent on what the Rockets offense ultimately looks like. And then there's a few other stats here that I wanted to share about how the Rockets have performed so far defensively this postseason. Right now, players are shooting 8 of 23. That's low. That's all the way down 34.8% with Alperen Sengun as the primary defender so far here in the playoffs through 2 games, which is currently second best among all centers in the postseason behind Rudy Gobert. So Alperen Sengun, we talked about his defensive impact in our last episode. He's been phenomenal on the defensive side of the floor, really, really holding his own in some of the Rockets' defensive schemes and kind of what they're running, whether they're running their zone defense or whether they're being more aggressive and trying to, trap Curry on the perimeter if he's up playing more at the level of the screen. So Sengun's been really solid there. And Amen Thompson has done a great job defensively too, or, did a much better job defensively in game 2. He struggled a little bit in game 1, but in game 2, Amen Thompson held the Warriors to just 1 of 8 shooting from the field. And he held the one shot that was made was Steph Curry, but he held Curry to just 1 of 4 shooting from the field while also forcing 3 turnovers on Steph. So Amen locked in, a lot more defensively. He was a lot more calm and much more himself in that game 2 win for the Rockets. But this is the thing, right? Is this series has been so unbelievably physical between these two teams. The hope is that it doesn't ultimately escalate into like a full-blown brawl or fight, which it kind of feels like things are trending that way. My expectation for game 3 being out in the Bay Area, being on the Warriors home court, I fully expect the refs to call that thing pretty tight from the beginning. I think that that's the danger area for the Rockets, is they're going to have to adjust very quickly to a very tight whistle, probably right out of the gate, because I'm sure that the messaging surrounding the series and kind of some of the stuff that went on between Draymond and Fred VanVleet and Amen Thompson and the Jimmy Butler injury and all this stuff last game, the NBA is not going to want to have a full-scale altercation on their hands. So the refs are probably going to get a memo early on. Hey, don't let this game get out of hand early. Tone down some of the physicality. Don't let them get away with some of the stuff that they've been getting away with in the series so far. That's my expectation for game 3. And the Rockets are going to have to adjust to that because they play an incredibly physical style of basketball. I'll be honest, the Rockets have gotten away with a lot of contact in this series. As frustrating as it is to see Draymond Green and Pat Spencer get away with these cheap shots and dirty plays against the Rockets. The Rockets have gotten away with a lot of physicality, being handsy with Steph Curry, grabbing his shorts, grabbing his jersey, wrapping him up, when the Warriors are trying to inbound the ball, different little things here and there to gain that offensive advantage, right? Ime Udoka fully believes and instills that idea of they can't call everything. They can't whistle for every foul. And we already saw the Rockets have more than enough cavalry to withstand some foul trouble. Amen Thompson and Dillon Brooks were both in foul trouble in game 2. It just means more minutes and more time for Tari, Eason, and Jabari Smith Jr. off of the Rockets bench. And then, also potentially some extra reps for, you scale up the minutes for Jalen Green, for Fred VanVleet. You insert some Aaron Holiday minutes in there. Rockets have more than enough wings to throw out there if guys start getting in foul trouble. So I really this Rockets defense is so legit. And that's where so much of my confidence for any kind of a postseason run for them kind of came from, is I knew that their defense would absolutely translate to the playoffs. And so far it absolutely has. Rockets have pretty much put a lid on the Warriors, not breaking 100 across 2 straight games. And yeah, you can get into the whole, they didn't have Jimmy game 2. Maybe things are different. But again, it's not even like the Warriors are just having a bad bad shooting affairs, at least from long distance. Now the Rockets have limited them shooting wise inside the arc. In game 2 specifically, Warriors only shot a really abysmal 41.3% inside the arc. So the Rockets did a much better job defending inside the 3-point line there in game 2 in particular. But even when Jimmy comes back, right, you're going to get let's just say, you get 25 or 30 from Jimmy, you get another 25 or 30 from Steph. Like, where are the Warriors getting the rest of their points from? That's the real big question mark, right? Brandon Pajemski? Moses Moody? Who? Is it going to be Buddy Hield off the bench is going to be their savior? Like, I just don't see where they're getting their other stuff from. Draymond Green's not a scorer. He's not going to go off. It's going to take, for the Warriors to beat the Rockets, it's going to take 3 more damn near perfect games from Steph and Jimmy simultaneously, right? It can't just be, Steph has a great night and then Jimmy has a so-so night, or vice versa. They both need to play at like their 99th percentile outcome, ceiling, whatever you want to call it, at their best to even have a remote chance to beat this Rockets team. And they've got to do that 3 more times. And through the last 3 meetings, they've failed to crack 100 points. Now, yeah, the Rockets offense is a question mark as well, right? What version of the Rockets offense do you get? What version of Jalen Green do you get? Are the shooters hot? Are they cold? Are they missing shots? That's all very fair, right? But the Rockets defense so far has done its job admirably, slowing down the Warriors. And I don't see that changing with or without Jimmy Butler. And so it's all going to be up to the Rockets offense to actually execute, for the shooters to knock down shots. And if they can do that, I was so confident in Rockets in 6 in the series, and that confidence didn't change after game 1. And I'm as confident as ever after game 2, even if Jimmy Butler comes back in the series. Who cares? Rockets are the better team. They flat out are. They're proving it on the defensive side of the ball. They settled in offensively. Jalen Green has arrived here in the postseason, and he and Alperen Sengun have already both had, a pair of kind of signature playoff performances, and they're only going to get better with each passing game in the playoffs as they settle further and further into this series. So game 3 is going to be really interesting out in the Bay Area. We're going to have one more show out for you before then with the GOAT himself, Ryan Hollins. So be on the lookout for that episode as well, dropping Saturday morning. But that's going to do it for today's episode. I want your thoughts on the Rockets' offensive adjustments from game 1 to game 2. What do you think about the defense? Can they continue to keep the Warriors under 100 points per game in this series? And what do you think about the Amen Thompson stuff and Warriors fans acting like a bunch of crybabies? Let me know your thoughts in the YouTube comments. Remember, the best way to help us grow our show is to listen every single day on a podcast platform of your choosing. Like, comment, subscribe on YouTube. Also, check out our Locked On Rockets newsletter. But as always, thank you so much for watching. Thank you so much for listening. And we look forward to having you back right here at Locked On Rockets, your daily podcast home for everything Houston Rockets basketball.